Hello, welcome back to Cisco Knowledge Base. This is Zach from Content Security Team. We have a very basic topic today. I would like to go ahead and discuss quickly. Log subscriptions. Oftentimes we do get calls and cases, although they are not complex, but yet we still get a fair amount of questions on how the log subscription works, what are the different type of logs on web security appliance, how we can change the debug level or trace level so we can get more information, which logging can be syslog push, which can be FTP, which can be SCP. So I thought it would be a good idea. We thought as a team it would be a good idea to go put together a documentation that walk them through. So with that is the topic, as I said, is the web security appliance log types and the steps how we can configure sometimes a custom field requires on the access logs where when we're troubleshooting a performance issue, we want to see more than what the default fields are. That gives us a clue as to what's happening on the wire to look at the right field. And the debug or trace level for troubleshooting. So what kind of log subscriptions on the web security appliance? So let's briefly run over the list and then we'll go over each individual item, a little bit more details. The log subscription on a web security appliance, these are the first, give us a first clue as to if something is not working as intended, what kind of information. So it's like a vital signs, and if you will, as to what kind of information will give, what kind of error it will spit out. In HTTP and HTTPS world, there are certain numeric fields or numbers. So for example, for HTTP 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500s, where we know 100s are informational, 200s are okay, we want to see, 300s are redirect from point A to point B, 400 most of the time is a client-side errors, 500 server-side errors, just overall, very general. But so we'll look at the brief description of each logging type, and I have also put a link here for user guide that does an excellent job on these pages. Could be used for reference at all the time, and I personally myself use it all the time as well. So how do we configure some configurable option within the logs, meaning FTP, SCP, syslog push, how we could do that, how often we can roll over these options within the logs so we can have new logging saved. Compression can be done. Async OS uses gzip compression, but it's standard format. And it talks about in page 606 on the user guide as well. And then we'll look at the how we can add additional logs. So what does that mean is by default, and we'll look at the list of it, what logs are enabled by default. So I have probably rough figures about 50 logs on web security appliance. Of course, it's going to take a CPU cycles, memory and everything. So not all the logs are enabled by default. And we'll look at which ones are enabled by default, which one is not, and what information will give us if we do enable, and how do we enable it from CLI or from the GUI. I put an example for WCCP module log. Just on a side note, starting 7.5 and upward, we have created additional log, WCCP module log. Previously, this information was logged into proxy logs for all the WCCP communication. We'll look at the sample access log and all the relevant field. How do you read that? It's kind of encrypted. What's all this gibberish, right? It talks about in detail on page 611, 628 in user guide. Some of the commands we can do. Basically, the timing it's in Unix or epoch, right? So we can convert that timing into a couple of ways. Shell command date minus R and then time, but we'll look at some of the other tools. Then I've included some of the flags for the custom field in the bottom. For the timing, actually, I'm jumping ahead here. %L is a local time in human readable format. That can be used as a custom field. That will spit out in date, month, and year, just like a standard. So that will be more readable. Custom formatting in access log. W3C log, as we know, this is the industry standard IEEE way to do it. We do support that as well. And I'm not sure if it's enabled by default or not, but I have to look at it. I think it's not, but I could be wrong. And then it has a multiple variable that I can add within W3C log, so I can have those information recorded. And on the bottom, oftentimes when engineers are working on cases where need additional information, such as transaction ID, wait time for first response byte from a origin content server, wait time to receive a response. There are many others. We do ask in support cases where can we additionally add these custom fields so we can obtain those information and see what exactly happening on the wire. Why is it failing or not getting the behavior that we intend to get? How do we access these logs? Administrators and user, those have access, can access via FTP, very simple. FTP : // IP or the host name will give you the all the logs. We'll take a look at as well. And last but not least, there's a log config command on the CLI that allows you to add, change, modify, log level, all sort of thing apart from the GUI. So we'll look at that as well. Okay. So with that, log subscription and where that option is in the GUI. Let's log in one of the machines. Go under System Administration, log subscription. So I have added some of the logs here. We'll look in the user guide which logs are enabled by default to give us an idea. So the logs that we are looking for, if it's not there, that means it's not enabled by default in a new deployment. So once you deploy the box, web security appliance, once it's in production, once it's out of the box and configured, there will be a several number of logs already in there. If not, for example, let's see, WCCP module log that I was looking. So I don't see it in there. The good thing is these are alphabetical, so definitely helps to read. We're going to add log subscription. Here I can select the logs. So these are all my logs. So for example, I was mentioning WCCP module log, starting with 7.5. We record all the WCCP communication under this log. We call it name, any name, WCCP or same name. And there are some options, roll by time, or starting with 7.5, I believe we added the custom interval time. So I can roll this log 120 seconds. It might be, depend on the environment, how busy it is, right? It could be a lot of data in 2 minutes. 5 minutes, 30 seconds, I think that's the minimum it will bark at you if it's like 1 second. Log name, these are the level. So these are pretty detailed here. Trace is the most detailed setting. So sometimes we do require to do trace. Word of caution, if we do that, once we're done troubleshooting, go back and change it. FTP, we can do SCP, push out to servers, pretty standard. Host key for SCP requires, and user guide does an excellent job. So with that, let's go back to our notes so we want to make sure we follow. So brief description for each log types, what they are, what they do on Web Security Appliance. I'm going to follow the user guide. That is my reference as well, and does an excellent job. So page 594. So let's go there. Log file types. So starting at page 594, log file types indicates here. Let's put this over here. Okay. So as we see here, these are starting from, these are alphabetical lists. So access log, control engine. These are the column is useful. Supported syslog push, yes and no. So recently we start doing a syslog push for access log. What that means is this. Let's look at our access log. So name, custom roll by time, log style, default was to squid, and then I can do FTP, SCP, and then syslog. So I can have my syslog server, all my entry on the access log can be go in my syslog repository. That will come handy in case of troubleshoot, or you can parse it, look at the if anything happening on the alert basis, so you can do a lot of management there. So that's for syslog. Not all the logs support syslog push. So if you are in doubt and you want to see it, come back here, look at the log type, access log, supported syslog, and it does now. So this document that I'm looking at need to be updated because the time or the release which is running on, I'm running this is 7.0, starting with 7.5. If you look at the user guide on 7.5, this will be yes. So enabled by default, yes. So authentication, frame log, and these are the detailed description. So if we are in doubt what this log does, we can take a look at it. For example, ABC engine log, this is for application visibility control, and record debug messages, and these are enabled by default, and does also do a syslog. So just going down the list. CLI audit log, record all the historical data. Configuration logs, not actually commands that you type in, it does not do that yet. CLI is enabled by default. So as you look at it, just to give you reference, you will see more no than yes. So far, if you're looking at the enabled by default column, you will see a lot more no's, just because that's more CPU intense. Data security log is an IDS on the box that you can enable it. And that is under security services and data transfer filters, Cisco Iron Port data security filters. Once I enable that, then I can go here and create my Iron Port data security policy. So identity policy, then I can do a lot of things in here. So that's that. DCA, this is tied with the Cisco Iron Port web usage control, which is acceptable use control. And if I do edit here, that's my Cisco Iron Port web usage control. These are my application visibility control. One of the is application, the other one is engine, and that's what those logs are. This is when you enable CWOOC, we call it. These are not checked by default. These are unchecked. So just a side note. Okay. So going down the list, default proxy log, yes, yes. A big description. What's the disk manager log does, and no syslog, it's not enabled by default. And as we said before, I can go into under logging subscription in here, and I can pick any log that I want to enable and go ahead and enable that. Disk manager log, that's how we're looking at it. We can enable that here as well and start logging those. Okay. So the list, as I said, is pretty big. External authentication log, if I'm using an external server for authentication, such as Radius and whatnot. Okay, FTP, This is the GUI log. Any changes through the GUI, this is going to record only the commit. It's not going to actually record what was changed in terms of, unless there is a comment field was put in that HTTP certificate was loaded and whatnot. License module, frame, McAfee, this is for antivirus, a couple of logs there. Let's see. And NTP log, mobile user, this is for when we have any Connect client coming in for secure mobility option. So that log can be useful. If you don't have that functionality enabled, then there is no reason for it. But it is enabled by default as we see it here. Pack file, those of you who use explicit environment with the pack file. Reporting, logs, software as a service, that's the SaaS. That's also enabled by default, uses for single sign-on for SAML. SHD, very good log to look at it, record history of the health of the box. It does support syslog push, and it is enabled by default. SNMP for management, SOFO, that's our antivirus again, SOFO log, status log, L4TM, which is layer 4 traffic monitor. UDS log is also a pretty good log for looking at the anything is a name without doing authentication. So include a lot of interaction, Cisco Adaptive Security Appliance, which is the ASA. Updater log, this is a useful information in updater log where if I am doing a signature updates, what I mean by that is, let's check. So this is one of the lab box. I'm not sure if he's updating the signatures, but the updater log here would all these signatures, they are getting updated. So this one is getting updated. So all these signatures on this machine are getting updated. It will keep track if anyone is failing. That should be log here, log number 35 in this box. Updater log. Okay, W3C log, that's the IEEE method of doing things, standard, industry standard. It's not enabled by default, but it's supported syslog push. So actually it does not support syslog push, but it's not enabled by default either. We can enable it, but then you have to add fields to it, which field you want to use. Network participation, sender base, that's basically if you are participating in the recategorization or request. So this is over security services, sender base. This one is disabled here, but that can be enabled here and edit. So that's what WBNP, it's the, I can do a limited summary or I can standard, and these are the feedback to Cisco. So if any of the URL that need to be specified in a certain domain, and I can make an exclusion list as well here, as you see. Okay. And these are pretty standard log, web categorization, welcome page. So you see this, I think we're almost done here. So key thing to look at, if any of the log that doesn't make any sense of what this log would do, or if you're looking at, you can do reverse engineering. I need this information for web routes, so which would do that? And you come down in a PDF, look at the line, if it's enabled by default, if not, you can go enable it. Go under log subscription, and you can also look at there as well. What I mean by that is over here, this has the entire list. But if you need a reference one-on-one what this ABC engine frame log would do, then I can go and look at my reference here. So pretty straightforward. I mean, this is nothing unusual. Okay, so on page 606, that's where it goes on the detail. This is where adding and editing log subscription. So I think we ran through briefly on a very initially when we add system administration, log subscription, add log, and we start adding the new log. All these fields here, FTP, SCP, if there's a syslog, and how we want to roll over to it, what's the size, what's the name, that's what he's talking about. All the add log subscription. This is on page 606 as we see. You can add log subscription, log styles, by default is squid. All the custom fields, basically just runs over what we saw in the GUI. Critical, warning, information, debug, trace. So it's a good reference to have that as well. And FTP, remote server, basically where you want to FTP your files to, logging information to. If you're not using FTP, if you're using SCP, and if the log supports syslog push, then you can do it as well. Pretty standard. Need to have the port 514 open. One thing I think we do want to mention, there is a compression as well, and we support gzip compression, and that sits under, let's look at, let's get out of here. So if I go under access log, by default logging compression is unchecked. I can check it here, so it will save you some headache as for the data size, right? So it's got to be compressed on this side. So he uses the gzip compression algorithm. Additional log subscription, we talked about it on page 606, how you add it. We also will look at it, how you can do in command line. Sample access log field, again, page 611. I always go back to user guide as a reference because it has a lot of information. You just need to know what to look for and how to. So here's my sample access log look like. And for those of you who are work on a daily basis or administrator or managing these boxes, probably have seen it. So essentially what it is, how each field is being broken down so you can read it. Trying to make sense for the entire thing, it will be hard. What's happening here by just looking at this encrypted data. It will be a good idea to break it down. So the first is a timestamp in a Unix epoch. To read that, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Actually, the easiest way is there is a, this is just a shareware tool that I can, let's see if we can open it here. Open URL. So if I take that time that I see on the user guide, and this is a little bit older, so it might be 2010 or 11. We'll see. Okay. Nice color. Firefox. Took a while. Okay. I think something happening on Firefox. But eventually, that's where we tried. Let's see here. Copy or not. Edit, copy. That's where it's having a problem. Okay, let's try something else. Might have another browser here. Okay, that was something else. Copy. Not gonna go. All right, let's see what's going on in Windows here. If he takes it this time. Something is happening. Let's try Safari. Safari always works. Actually, okay, an extra W. All right, step one. That's supposed to be a quick one. All right, finally we made it. So Unix timestamp here, if we look at it, it converted to Friday, July 2010. So yeah, that's an older user guide. So back to this guy here. So if you're on a shell, you can also do with the date -r command, and with the time, it will spit out the current date. Custom formatting in the access log and W3C log, that's where come really handy when we are troubleshooting a lot of information. As if it's failing, as we said earlier, if its intended behavior is not there, then we can add certain custom field with the space in between if we have a multiple custom field. And a lot of time, as we said before, engineers will ask you, hey, can you add %, less than sign A or an I or L. Once you add those, once you're looking at the access log, at that point you will have additional information here, and all these information that will be valuable when you're troubleshooting such as performance cases or any other data that is not working that it should be. Okay, I'll stop the script. Okay, so let's look at the custom field. See if we came back here. Firefox is having a problem, so we'll just use Safari. Okay. For custom field, we'll go under log subscription, and I'll pick on the access log. So here is my custom field. So for example, we want to say %L. This will give me the local time in more human readable format, so much easier. I have another space, then I can do another I, A, or so there is a leading space needed. Basically, there is a blank here, then next one, and then blank again, and then next one. Also, all these custom fields that I had, some of them as an example in my notes, is coming from here. This is a great reference. So within here, let's see. If I just search for server, this gives me the detail about %D is going to give me data source of IP address. %K is going to give me data source IP address server IP address. So I'm keep going down the list. Server header response, direct, %I will give me the IP address of the last ICAP for those of you using a DLP, external DLP, more. Unified response. So this is a good one, this custom field here. The time it takes from the moment the web proxy starts the connection to the server. So if that time is huge, then I'm just going to be waiting on the response from the server to spit it out back to the client. So there's a lot of custom field, and here it could be a good study, but this reference sits right in a custom field under access log, all the logs that provide the custom field. So just need a leading space in middle between those. Okay. So this guy's definitely having a problem. Put him on the side here. So that was the, we talked briefly on the custom formatting access log and W3C log. So accessing logs via FTP. So when administrator wants to look at these access log itself, there's a couple of ways to do it. We can look at the in real time in here. So basically grabbing it, and you select the log, whichever log we want to see it, or you can just type the tail and access log, or tail or any log name that we want to see it. That will give you that as well. But getting into the actual directory where these logs reside will be a good idea. So let's take a look. Definitely want to stop the script there and close this guy. Let's go back to Safari. Okay, so what we wanted to see is, make sure. So we want to look at the all the logs directory on the RM port, how administrator can grab those, look at it, review it, export it, and anything they want to do. So we'll come down here, we'll say FTP, :// IP address. In this case, use that. Normally should prompt you, but I think I was logged in before, and that's why it did not. Let's try another box. So FTP, :// and IP address. That should bring you that your administrator password that requires or admin privilege. These are the logs, and as you notice, these are not in alphabetical order, and that's kind of throw you off. If you're looking at the access log, you don't see on the top of the list, it's not there. But as you scroll down, it's hiding. It's hiding over here. So once I go to access log, these are all my access log. Again, this is a lab box, so there's not much in it. But it gives you an idea, all these logs are accessible. Whichever logs is currently configured and collecting data will be in here. I can go into any of these logs and grab these. So that was the last bullet. Pretty straightforward, nothing surprising. Very last part, how to add and change. We saw in the GUI how we can do it from the command line. A lot of administrators have done it, but just a simple command. It's called log config. In log config, I can do a new, which is allow me to add any of these logs that I want to. Same functionality. It will walk you through to do a name, and see that right here. I just picked OCSP, logging level, all that, and it just walks you through all that. Once you're done, just type commit and you're done. The other option that sometimes we require is to get more information. So for example, I'll pick one, proxy logs. I want to edit that. I can also delete that as well. But the edit log, and I want to capture a lot of information on the proxy log. So number 23. By default, it's going to do informational, so it's not much information, which is, we don't want to overwhelm web security appliance, right? Debug, trace. So 5 is the most that it will have the data collected. And then the rest of them you can just hit enter out of it. So sometimes we also, engineers, we ask administrators, can we change the logging level to trace or debug for UDS log or access log or any other log that we're working on, depending on which technology, sub-technology you're working with. We can do that, and then make sure to turn it back to 3 once we're done. So just tap through out of it, and in the end just type commit, hit your comment, and it'll be done. So I think it got a little bit longer than I was intending to, but with some challenges. So with the review part, it's pretty straightforward. What are the log subscription, how we can change this custom field, what this custom field meant, on logging, debug, or trace level information. We went through detail what logs are on the machine, what we can do on FTP and SCP, steps to add additional logging subscription. We look at the sample log. I think we didn't go into detail, but it gives you an idea of the time. Next one is the elapsed time it took actually. XXX will be the client IP address, and then TCP miss, transaction result code. It gives you all the detail what the results will mean. 200 that we want to see, which is a good thing. And then this is a GET request. So what I would recommend is to go through one of them and parse every field and map it out and see makes sense in your environment. Capture an access log, and using this as a reference, look at it. What we will do is we'll create another knowledge base to troubleshoot while capturing the access log, and kind of correlates why is it failing, to look for the clues. We can do that, and then that will have a little bit more information as to in real time to why is it failing. But I will highly encourage to go take a look at it, grab an access log, and see, even though if it's working. So you can map it one to one in the field. Some custom field, you can add some custom field. One is great to play with is %L, uppercase. This will give you the local time. It will spit out the local time that the way we can human readable, as listed here. Or you can add some custom fields as we've shown in how many custom fields are out there that can give you more information than by default. Number 7 was FTP, how you can look at these logs and export it and send it to somebody else, or generate any other report with that. And then lastly was using the log config command, what that can provide and help you. With that, thank you so much for your time. Again, it's got a little bit longer than I intended, but I had some information. Thank you. Have a great day, great afternoon, and great evening. Thank you so much.